All right, and I think we have
Yes.
five commissioners plus me for 6 of us. If we want to just give it 1 minute to see if, oh, I think we just got a 7th. So we can probably, I think we're good to go. Applicants are good to go, Edith,
Yes.
Corey, okay. All right, great. So welcome back to our afternoon session for June 9th, our public hearing and public meeting day. We have one more public hearing item, and then we will be moving to public meeting items, which are items that have already had a public hearing and for which we've already heard testimony and given comments, and the applicants are back today with revised proposals in response to those comments from the public hearing. So Corey, will you start the agenda for the afternoon?
Sure. So we will go to item number 7, public hearing item number 7. This is LPC 19-40117, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1896, Lot 1, 420 Riverside Drive in the Morningside Heights Historic District. A Renaissance Revival style apartment building designed by Gaetan Aiello and built in 1911 to 12. The application is to establish a master plan governing the future installation of windows.
The applicants have joined the hearing. Please state your name for the record and you may begin.
Sure. Mike Robarge. I'm from Panorama Windows, and I will be presenting the proposed master plan for 420 Riverside Drive. And do I have control?
Yes, you do. You just need to click on the screen and then you can advance either using the mouse or your arrow keys.
Oh, okay. Oh, great. All right. So I'll start off on page 3. Here we have 2 historic photos, one being the tax map photo and another photo being provided by a resident of the building who is sort of the building's de facto historian. As you can see, there is a mix of casements and double hung units with no distinct pattern, all of which have largely been replaced throughout the building with aluminum replacement windows. Also, what we've highlighted in red to the left, and it is hard to see, but on the right-hand side, you can actually see the original elements are that the balconies and cornices have been removed throughout. And presently, there are no plans to replace them. You can also see along the top, a little hard to see, but there are arched units at the top. And I do have one image, which will be on page 4 of the front entrance. And in terms of pictures, those are what we've been able to obtain. We've not found any other images of the building. As we move to page 5, you can see the present day image of the building from the Riverside Drive and 114th Street side angle here. Presently, there are approximately 414 visible masonry openings with windows comprised of singles, doubles, or triples. And there are approximately an equal number of windows on the non-visible facade. Currently, as we move forward here, there are 5 openings that appear to be historic, with the remainder of the units all having been replaced in one manner or another. So as we move through, again, we've highlighted balconies and cornices that were removed in the clearer present day photo. You can also see some openings have been altered, and the lack of clarity with historic photos, which have not allowed us to get a very clear, full and established picture of what the historic windows were on the elevations. Especially on the Riverside Drive, the tax map photo is very hard to see what pattern may have existed throughout. As we move to page 7, this image shows that along the ground floor, there was a modern casement put in at some point prior to designation for the building. And in order to keep, since it is modern and new, we were proposing just at this front entrance to have that replicated on the opposing side of the building. As we move through the, starting with page 8, the remaining slides, I will go through and show you present day photos. This is 114th Street as we move up the street, showing the window well area, which just has a little bit of a setback in the inner courtyard here. And we'll move, this is the other section of the building as we continue to move up 114th. And then we have, again, a shot looking back down towards Riverside Drive with the first image. We have 2 images of the alleyway, which are visible from a public thoroughfare. Then the building does jog in to a non-visible facade. As we move to page 12, you can see these are what we believe to be the historic casement windows that are present on the 3rd floor. The one on the top image is from the Riverside Drive side of the building, and the 4 openings that you see on the image below are from the 115th Street, or 114th, excuse me, 114th Street side of the building as you round the corner from Riverside Drive. Again, just a shot pulled back to give you some perspective. On page 14, we have highlighted the back of the building, which would not be part of this master plan. And these, the highlighted area is the non-visible facade of the building with windows dispersed throughout. As we move to page 15, we show the existing window layout presently there. And then on the right-hand side, we show the proposed. This would be for the Riverside Drive facade. As we move to page 16, again, we have our existing to the left and our the windows both for both sections of the 114th Street side. And then here we have the proposed on page 17. What we are proposing is double hungs throughout to bring a unified look to the building. These are existing and proposed for that inner courtyard between the 2 main buildings. Again, continuing with the inner courtyard. And then we have finally the existing windows and the proposed for the alleyway. And then the shaded gray area is the area that starts the non-visible facade for the east facade of the building. Here we've laid out just the proposed and existing and proposed elevations on page 21 and 22. And then as well for page 23, we will also take the arched windows, which currently in their existing state have a fixed IG unit above a double hung. We will carry the double hung up past the masonry opening and then use brick mold to put back the feature of the arch and not have a fixed piece of glass above a regular double hung. And then that concludes our presentation. We do have an appendix that gets into vertical section details as well as horizontal. Our plan is to replace brick to brick so that we would remove all the material and put the proposed units within the masonry opening and in the same position as the original windows had been.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions at this time? Okay, not seeing any hands raised. I am going to move to public testimony. So now anyone who is in the meeting who would like to testify on the item should raise their hand, and Lisa will call the speakers.
So we had one person sign up, and that is Kelly Carroll. And Kelly, I've just moved you in.
Okay, let me just move the screen so I can read my testimony. Kelly Carroll for Historic Districts Council. A fair amount of Morningside Heights architectural exuberance can be traced back to the creative hand of Sicilian architect Gaetano Aiello, who often signed his buildings. Here at the Hamilton, originally Cliff House, several features of the architect's intention has unfortunately disappeared. Despite a missing cornice and the removal of balconies supported by massive brackets, the LPC staff still decided to list this building as contributing in the designation report. This implies a clear intention for, or indication to, a future LPC to encourage restoration of its architectural features. HDC argues that because the building has already suffered removals of ornament, that instituting the historically proper window configuration should be a priority as a step one to move this building in the correct direction. The presence of transoms on these windows is incredibly important to the design of the building, especially on the first 3 stories. If commissioners look closely at the tax photo, the transoms align with the rusticated masonry courses at floors 1 and 2, and then with the egg and dart course at the 3rd floor. At the very least, the window configuration should be implemented for these floors, ideally the entire building. The window master plan in Morningside Heights that commissioners viewed last week was of a building where no original windows remained for the past 40 years. Here, there are several surviving original casement windows, which offer a visual sample of the architect's stylistic choice and their intended relationship to this building. HDC asks that architect Aiello's fenestration design be put back on both the Riverside Drive and West 114th Street facades. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. And Kelly was the only person to sign up, and I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay, and
Is
Rich,
that
do we
complete the
have,
testimony?
okay, Rich, do we have any written testimony or community board resolution?
Yes, you have a resolution from Community Board 9 recommending approval.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, and now I'd like to turn back to the applicant to see if you'd like to respond to the comments about the change in configuration on this building.
Well, do I have am I on?
You're on, and
Okay, great.
if you click on the screen, you can advance the slides to photographs or other drawings that you'd like to show in your
Okay.
response.
So let me go back. While there are what appear to be 5 existing windows that we assume to be original, out of the 414 masonry openings, everything has been changed out except those 5. And when you look back at the tax map photo, and I'll get back to that, it is very unclear to us as to whether we're dealing with casements or double hungs, and especially along the Riverside Drive, we just don't have the information required. And along the Riverside Drive, we've done some probing, and where we figured there was a casement, we actually found double hungs, or double hung weight boxes with the weights cut and in the weight boxes. So what we're trying to do is bring some uniformity to the building. I don't think the transoms are necessarily needed, but you know, for the first 3 floors, if the commissioners felt that transoms with a double hung below would be more in keeping for those first 3 floors, I don't believe the building would have a problem with that. But our goal here was to try to put the building back to some sort of uniformity, which it presently is not.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any final questions before we move to discussion? Okay, and not seeing any questions, I think we can move to close the hearing. Commissioner Gustafson, would you make that motion?
So moved.
And Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. And I want to just note for the record that Commissioner Goldblum is not here for this item. Okay, so let's move to the discussion. And this is a building that is, as was stated, a contributing building. It is unclear. I think the staff has found that it's unclear exactly what the historic configuration was, because the photos seem to show a combination of double hungs and casements. And it may be that originally it had a combination or early on in its history. And like so many other applications where we see a master plan to achieve uniformity in the long term, this building has, the majority of its historic windows have been replaced, and the result has been a hodgepodge of window configurations, or at least window details. So the proposal is to do a double hung window, 1/1 double hung window, which is evident in the probe that was done, and it appears to be evident in one of the historic photographs, but to maintain casements, I believe, on the lower floors to match the relatively new ones on Riverside Drive. So with that, I'm going to start the discussion, and why don't we start across the table with Commissioner Gustafson?
How did I know that you were going to pick on me? I guess it's because I've been vocal on these issues in the past. I agree with the Historic Districts Council. Using the removal of other details of the building to justify removing or eliminating more details and more interesting features, it turns the world on its head. The worse you are, the worse you're allowed to get. That said, I hear that staff cannot establish what the history of the windows on much of the building really was. So trying to come back to something that's part of our imagination, really, there's no point there. I will take up the applicant on the notion of bringing the first 3 floors back as much as possible to original, with the transom and the double hung below, largely because it is a much more visible part of the building in a very prominent corner. And so I could approve that.
Okay, so approve the master plan for the 1/1, but with adding the transom and bringing back the historic configuration to the extent possible on the first 3 floors. Okay, and Commissioner Jefferson?
I agree with, excuse me, I agree with my fellow commissioner.
Okay, great. Commissioner Lutfi? Oops, I think you. Okay, I think Commissioner Lutfi, are you there?
Okay.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? So I'm confirming, before I say this, that the first 3 floors were casement. Is that correct?
Commissioners, I actually think it might be wise for Bernadette Artis, the Deputy Director, to jump in here and explain, because there are different variations. Not all of the original windows were the casements with transoms at the first 3 floors. There were double hungs as well. And further, the applicant's current proposal is to do casements only on a part of one floor. Now, they may have offered to do double hungs with transoms at the bottom 3 floors, but that's not exactly what the current proposal is. So I think I'm going to ask Bernadette to just explain a little bit more about the base.
Thank you.
If we can go back to like the 3rd or 4th page, I don't know who has control of the screen at this moment, but it shows a historic photograph that we had from early on of the entrance. I don't know. Edith, do I have control of the screen or? Okay, I can't move the slides, but I would say there is a historic photograph that shows the entrance. That would be helpful to look at because it shows that on the ground floor, they're actually, that's the photo. If you look to the right, there were double hung windows there. Our impression is that it actually may have been a building that had both double hungs and casements historically. The casements may have been placement wise related to where the balconies were. We've even found that some of the windows in that small courtyard area are taller than the other window openings, suggesting that some of the window openings had casements and some of them had double hung. But it's hard to tell on all of the window openings, especially because a lot of the balconies have been removed and a few of the window openings have been modified so they're not in their original size.
Okay, Bernadette, just one more clarification. Thank you so much. The existing casement windows are relatively new, is that correct?
There is one apartment on the 3rd floor that we believe that they are the historic casement windows. The apartment on the ground floor that has the casement windows, though, are modern. They're clearly modern windows. So to the left of this entrance, there are modern casement windows. And then at the 3rd floor at the corner, there are about 5 historic casements.
Okay. So then I am actually there, there are no balconies anymore. So, and those windows are 1/1s now. So, and if the 1st floor windows are not historic, then I actually believe that everything should be 1/1s. For uniformity.
Commissioner Bland,
I think I'm in that same camp.
Commissioner Chen,
Likewise, yeah.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Believe that the first 3 floors should have the original configuration.
Okay, but if it's unclear what that was, I think.
And we need to do more research.
Okay, and Commissioner Goldblum is not back yet, so we'll go to Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I'm actually also in favor of the first 3 floors. Ideally being a historic configuration. I wasn't clear on the issue of the transoms. I understood, that there appear to be 2 different kinds possibly on the 3 floors, some casements and some double hung. At least that's what we think based on photographs, not necessarily on probes, I think. So I am in favor of obviously some uniformity, but I also would like to see the best we can do to try to return to those first 3 floors. And obviously this building, the other thing is their air conditioners, which there isn't anything we can do about, but sort of trying to establish a pattern of air conditioning perhaps would also help some uniformity with this building. I don't know how possible that is based on interior design of the apartment. So anyway, so that's where I'm at.
Okay, Commissioner Holford Smith.
I tend to agree with the Historic Districts Council. I think the building having been shown of all of its ornament makes the windows even more important, and the double hungs make it look like a modern thing. And I think that the historic photo, it's fairly clear. I mean, I think that there might be some conjecture, but it looks like the 3 paired windows were double hungs and the corner windows were the transom casements. I would actually argue for going back to the original configuration for the entire building.
Commissioner Shamir Barron?
Yes, I'm more in line with that approach. And I think, I continue to look at the photograph that Bernadette cited that obviously clearly has, it's some historic moment, and it has what looked like the thinner transoms as resulting in something like a casement, and then the wider windows as double hung. And it's clear to me that these were mixed at some historic period moment. So either we find kind of what we think the oldest sets of windows are in the building, which would be the kind of research that Commissioner Devonshire is pointing out, I'm assuming, or we try to really at least understand that from either existing photographs that we have or otherwise of the first 3 floors, to try to keep it as much like in its mixed form as is represented in some of the earlier photographs or the designation photographs. So I guess I'm saying the first 3 floors, I'm not for uniformity. I'm for achieving whatever kind of mix may have been there and represented in whatever imagery, photographic or otherwise, we have.
Okay. All right. So I think that the majority of commissioners would support the 1/1 double hung windows on the upper floors, given that it was a window type that was found historically on this building. But that at the ground floor, first 3 floors, would like to see something that more closely aligns with the historic documentation, at least the historic photos, that shows a combination and maybe the inclusion of some transoms. So I think we could do an approval with modifications to work closely with the staff to identify the appropriate mix of window types at the first 3 floors that most closely recalls the historic documentation. So why don't I make that motion, because it'll be a little bit different, okay? So this is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, docket number LPC 1940-117, 420 Riverside Drive in the Morningside Heights Historic District, a Renaissance Revival style apartment building designed by Gaetan Aiello and built in 1911 to 1912. This is an application to establish a master plan governing the future installation of windows. And I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Morningside Heights Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that almost all of the historic windows were casement windows were replaced with 1/1 double hung windows, and some of the window openings have been altered in size prior to the designation of the district, and that portions of the historic fenestration pattern are not definitively known or documented, that without the context of the historic masonry balconies, which were removed prior to designation of the historic district, the alternating pattern, I'm going to strike that one, that returning the that the proposed 1/1 double hung windows will be in keeping with the window types which historically existed at this building in terms of configuration, operation, and details, that the proposed finish will be in keeping with finishes historically found at buildings of this type, style, and age, and that the presence of a uniform fenestration pattern above the first 3 floors of 1/1 double hung windows will be in keeping with the historic fenestration patterns found at other buildings of this type, style, and age in this historic district, and that the establishment of a master plan will help maintain a unified fenestration pattern in keeping with the character of the building. However, I find that the windows at the first 3 floors do not successfully recall the configuration and mix of configurations found in the historic photographs, and that the applicant work with the staff to identify and revise the proposal to include a revised set of window configurations that evoke the historic mix found in the historic photographs. Okay. Commissioner Alfred Smith, would you second that motion? All right, if you're not comfortable, I can have Commissioner Shamir Barron. Would you second that motion?
Second.
Okay, all right. Rich, will you call the vote and we'll see where we are.
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum is still not here. Oh, he is. Commissioner Goldblum?
I think he didn't see enough of the presentation. I think he came in while I was reading.
Okay, so I'll, Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith, who I don't see anymore on our screen.
Huh. Okay.
Okay. 9 in favor, none opposed, the motion carries.
Okay, so that is approved with the modifications to continue to work with the staff on refining the configuration of the windows at the first 3 floors. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, we're going to move on to our public meeting items for the remainder of the afternoon. The first is item number 1, LPC 20-06316. This is an application for an amendment. This is in the Borough of Queens, block 8017, lot 19, 320 Kenmore Road in the Douglaston Historic District. An English cottage style converted garage with chauffeur's quarters designed by Josephine Wright Chapman and built in 1913. The application is to modify and legalize work completed in non-compliance with Certificate of Appropriateness 19-12178.
And Commissioners, the staff will be presenting this item, and I will now hand it off to staff. And you may begin.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Abby Hurlbut, Preservation Staff. This application is to modify and legalize work completed in non-compliance with Certificate of Appropriateness 19-12178 at 320 Kenmore Road, located on the south side of Kenmore Road between Marinette Street and East Drive in the Douglaston Historic District. The application for the construction of the new building was approved by the Commission in May of 2017. Since that time, the building has been completed, and there are several changes to the design that was originally approved by the Commission. So I'll take you through the front facade and then briefly through the secondary facades. And then the architect should be here to answer any questions. So starting here, this is the previous slide is what was approved by the Commission. This is the front, secondary facades, rear, secondary. This is what was completed. Here's the front, secondary, secondary, and rear. So at the base of the building, at the front facade, the door surround has been simplified. The bay window features masonry piers instead of metal, and some of the leaders have been installed at the primary facade instead of at the returns. And you can see that better with the elevations. So here's what was approved. Here's the door surround that was simplified, the metal windows, and now here's the masonry. At the second story of the front facade, the proportions of the window and dormer have been shortened, and the window sills and details have also been shortened. By sills, we're looking at these here, and the windows have been shortened. Throughout the building, the gables feature larger eave returns, and the windows are set closer to the facades, and there's a detail of that towards the end of the presentation. I'm sorry, the presentation is stuck.
Okay, let me just see.
So finally, on the secondary facades, I'll just continue and I'll walk you through the rest of the presentation. A vent was installed, and the chimney at the secondary west facade was simplified and does not feature the corbelling that was approved by the Commission. So the applicants are proposing to address certain aspects of the design. Here we go. Thank you, Edith. So at the front facade, they are proposing to replace the wood sills with the longer sills, as you can see here. Reduce the size of the eave returns at the base of the building at the front facade, relocate the leaders from the primary facade to the secondary facades, and install corbelling at the chimney. The rest of the work the applicant is proposing to legalize. And let me take you through to show you the window drawings, as I mentioned previously. So here's what was approved, and here's what was installed. And the architect should be here to answer any questions.
Hello, can you hear me?
Is there anything you'd like to add at this point, or would you just like to take questions?
I'll just take questions.
Okay, we have a few questions. We'll start with Commissioner Goldblum, followed by Commissioner Gustafson. Okay, Commissioner Goldblum, I've asked to unmute you if you can. Yeah.
Thank you. I noticed that the front window was shown with a continuous bay window, it looks like in the renderings, where from edge to edge, it was all wood, and the mullions connecting the three windows were fairly narrow. And that is also true of the bottom right image, where the three windows in a row in the original proposal were shown as three windows connected by posts as opposed to areas of stucco. Is that something, what are you proposing to do with those particular details? Also, let me just note, I'm sorry, it looks from the rendering that the windows extended on the bottom right image all the way up to the underside of the soffit, whereas in the actual built example, they seem to stop significantly short of that soffit. Can you explain what happened there and what your proposal is to do about it?
Okay, starting with the front bay window, we had specified a single unit. Due to some cost restraints, they chose to buy individual windows and join them within the frame wall. So the proposal there is to keep it the way that it is. We felt that was still consistent with the style of the house and wasn't that big of a disruption to the design. On the rear of the house, on the bottom right corner image, as you mentioned, the three windows, almost exactly the same scenario. We specified one assemblage of windows, which would have had small mullions in between. Due to cost, they purchased individual units and framed them within the walls. The actual head of the windows did not change. The roof line at the back of the house was actually raised. We had the roof, top of plate for that roof was lower, and there was going to be a splay inside of the rooms. The purchaser of the house did not want to see the splay. He wanted a continuous, full height ceiling in the back part of the house. So we raised the plate and gave him the flat ceiling that he wanted.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson.
I have a different kind of question here.
Sure.
It's very rare that we have a project come to us that we approve, and then it's, occasionally something goes wrong here or there, but there are a dozen or more places where this doesn't comply with what we approved. So what I want to know is, how do we get to this? I mean, who's responsible for this? Who's, I hate to use the word, but who's to blame for this? I mean, this is bizarre. I mean, you can't, some things, I mean, a contractor can do, but how could a contractor just decide to raise the roof?
We were dealing with an owner builder here. And there was a purchaser very involved during the construction. So some of the items, we were consulted with, and they told me what they were trying to do. And like I said, they were in keeping with the design of the house. They weren't drastic changes of eliminating, major architectural elements. So we told them it was okay to proceed. Some of the items we would find out, when it got well past some of the major construction elements already being put in. That's the best I can explain.
Okay, we'll go to Commissioner Jefferson, followed by Commissioner Chapin.
Yes, what's the landmark's position? What's the process? I mean, you design a building, gets approved, goes into construction. The architect has to make changes. Does he come back to landmarks and say, I'm making the following changes? Would you agree with them? What's the system?
Yeah, that's the process. When we issue our permits, we have language in our permits that say that should the proposal or site conditions result in changes to the proposal, so should the proposal change or site conditions result in changes to the proposal, applicants must stop work and come to the commission and ask for an amendment. So that's why Commissioner Gustafson was asking how this could have happened without them coming back for an amendment in advance. So the work was completed, some decisions were made in the field, and the permit duration is still valid, the permit length is still valid, so they're now seeking that amendment after the fact as a legalization. But it should have happened before the work was completed. Okay, Commissioner Chapin. Oh, you're still, what happened? You're muted, hang on. Yeah. With the new webinar, sometimes you have to accept my unmuting you, the new update.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I obviously had similar questions to those of Commissioner Gustafson and others. It's very disappointing to see a new building which was approved and just go through a lot of changes. Obviously, there was, as the architect said, an owner builder, which no doubt caused part of the problem. And it sounds like a different purchaser, but there was an awareness certainly on the part of the architect, who has an obligation to come back to us, that changes were being made which were not approved by the commission. And it's not really the architect's job to decide those changes aren't important enough to come back to the commission, unless they are very minor indeed and not visible. And anyway, I think
so we're in questions right now.
I think I'd like the architect to go through again the main changes and how he feels that they have sufficiently returned to something that is appropriate for this building. The corbelling of the chimney is, I think, the easiest one. Removing the leaders from the front of the building is obvious. It's an obvious thing that can be done. I think probably the change in the door is not such a problem. But there's some fundamental redesign going on here. And I guess we can return, as Commissioner Gustafson often says, to would we have approved this as presented? And if not, what can be done about it? But I'd like to hear from some other members of the commission, but I do find this very disappointing.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, well, I think we'll go to public testimony now, and we may have more questions after that. And then, when we ask the applicant to respond, I think he can take that opportunity to talk about how he believes the changes and the modifications that he's making make the features of this building appropriate to this historic district. So anyone who is attending the meeting who would like to, yes?
This is a public meeting item.
Oh, that's right. It's an amendment. Forgive me. Okay. Rich, we don't have any written comments on this?
No, no additional comments.
Okay. All right. So then I think the applicant should now respond to Commissioner Chapin's final, her question about how do you feel these features relate to the historic district?
Sure. We looked at the changes. I consulted with the owner and tried to get as many of the changes corrected as I could. Things that were we felt really didn't have any really effect on budget or didn't have a tremendous effect on disruption of the owner. We would insist that he does fix the eaves, making the eaves open as were originally approved. I'm sorry. Okay, making the eaves open as were originally approved, we felt was something that would put it back into character with the style of the Tudor homes. The big pork chop eaves really we felt did not match, and the owner is willing to correct those items. Simple thing like the gutter on the front of the house. It is a very prominent facade of the house. I think the leader in the front is noticeable and objectionable from everybody that's looking at it. So that we helped, he could move that back to where we originally approved and it would not be a major disruption. The one major item that I hear everybody and I agree is the bay window. Short of, we gave him an option of, we gave staff an option of making it all in trim, making the mullions at least the brown color that were on the original design. It started to look even more cumbersome and heavy than leaving the stucco. We did find other Tudor homes that had stucco bays with window elements in them. And we felt that was not an item that we felt was really affecting the overall design of the house. Only that when you look at the approved presentation and you see it, do you notice it as being something that is standing out? The rear of the house, being out of sight from the street and getting again the buyer what they wanted was something we felt was a priority, giving them the higher ceilings. And so we did not insist on lowering the roof. And the corbelling of the chimney, absolutely, he's going to make that repair and make that consistent with the approved plans. And the sills, which were made narrow, will be widened, again, getting it closer to the approved plan.
All right, and if there are no final discussions, then we should move into, no final comments, we should move into our discussion. And John, because I missed the fact that this was an amendment, I never actually made a motion to open the proceedings before I asked the applicant to speak. So shall I do that retroactively, even though we're now going to close the proceedings?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to make or actually Commissioner Chapin, will you make a motion to open the proceedings to allow the applicant to speak, which we've already done? And I'm asking to unmute you to do that.
So moved.
Okay, and Commissioner Holford Smith, will you second that motion?
I second it.
Okay, and all in favor of allowing the applicant to speak by opening the proceedings, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so for the record, the proceedings were open to allow the applicant to speak. And now we'll move to our discussion. And this was a house that the commission approved. And when we review new buildings, we spend a considerable amount of time reviewing not only the overall height, massing, proportions, and composition, but also the details. And what we're seeing today is a request for an amendment to legalize some details that were changed in the field and to make some modifications to correct some. So it's disappointing, but we should look at it in terms of what the ultimate effect will be after the proposed further modifications to those and whether we would find those appropriate within this historic district. And Commissioner Goldblum, can I ask you to start this one?
Sure. Well, it is really disappointing. And I think that the result is very negative. I think that the front bay window is demonstrably worse than what was proposed. I think that the feature of a kind of contiguous window, as shown in the renderings, is much more consistent with the style than the one shown. There may be examples of it, I wouldn't doubt that, but not what we approved. I would, my default thought was to ask them to do the trim instead of the stucco in those locations. But if the applicant says that it really didn't work, then maybe they have to replace that window with a window or with a triple that is that has a narrower post. I looked at the framing plan. There's way more real estate devoted to that post than is actually necessary from a structural point of view to encase 3 windows. So it's not just that they went to 3 individual windows, but they did it in a way that had them rather separated from each other in a way that was excessive from what would be necessary on a more, if you were trying to emulate the rendering. In terms of the back facade, it makes an already compromised design worse. I think there one could add a fascia board under the entire overhang and add trim between the windows instead of the stucco, not on top of it. That would allow for a kind of squinting emulation of what was approved. I think that the removal of the applicant said the pork chop eaves is important and should be done everywhere. And the corbelling is very important. In general, the house is a sad example of kind of, you know, if you look at its neighbor to the right and see how rich it is, even on its secondary facades, and you compare that to this, it's not good. And to allow for it to get worse through this kind of process is just not something that I think we should sanction.
Okay. All right. Okay, and so the bay window and then adding wood trim to the bay window and the windows at the rear, removal of the pork chop eave, and are all recommendations you would make, but otherwise would approve the legalization and the modifications that are proposed?
Yeah, I think the other modifications, the fencing, the power, you know, the Con Ed meter and all that stuff looked okay. The change of the stair at the rear seemed all right. I mean, a lot of the details of this are just really unfortunate.
Yeah.
So looking at the page that we're looking at now, the way those windows are set into the wall is about as low budget as you could possibly imagine. It's very unfortunate. And the other thing I would just reiterate is I was suggesting putting a fascia board along the top of the entire back facade, and basically wherever you have that 1-story roof, if you were to put a fascia board under it, that would kind of pick up the windows that were meant to align with it. It would at least somewhat alleviate the sense that those windows are floating unmoored. They were originally meant to be seen as attached, kind of as a kind of visual unit with the roof.
Okay. All right, thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
I'd rather speak a little later after I hear
Okay.
the, thank you.
Sure. Commissioner Holford Smith?
I think, are you hearing it? I'm hearing it. Echo. I agree with the comments of Commissioner Goldblum.
Okay.
I think the bay is compromised, and he points out, well, the framing is excessive, and perhaps, are you hearing an echo as well?
Yes.
Sorry. I'm in trouble with my audio.
Do you have two devices on? Maybe. Okay, all right, we'll move on. Commissioner Shamir Barron?
I don't know. I'm not, oh, me too, but I don't have another device on.
That's strange. Okay.
I just want to say that I'm not as offended or appalled by some of the, by the overall house as compared to the way it's approved version. So I mean, when I pull it apart, I'm in agreement really, ultimately with Commissioner Goldblum's points, I guess, especially the one about the bay, but the rest of it, strangely, I know this is strange, and I certainly don't want to approve or condone the kind of abandoning our decisions and the ability for whether it's an owner, builder, or the architect to make those decisions. But in the end, there's something that kind of strangely holds together in the final house. And so I guess I just want to say that. But if in fact everyone feels that things need to be returned to some of the approved decisions, then I would say the bay is for me the one that stands out the most.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, and I'm gonna now go to Commissioner Gustafson.
Well, I agree with Commissioner Goldblum on all of his comments and the details. I think I disagree with Commissioner Shamir Barron on whether the whole thing hangs together. I think that's one of the issues I have, is that I think what we approved in the first place was, in the scale of appropriateness, modestly appropriate to the district, and what's happened to it is it's not only lost its whatever connection it might have had, but it's also now internally muddled. I think when you look at the back of the house and you look at the windows, the scheme of those windows, it looks like two different houses, one on top of the other. And the same thing happens in the front of the house. It doesn't have its own internal consistency. So I can't imagine that we would have approved this I shouldn't speak for others. I wouldn't have approved this in the first instance. So and I agree with the suggestions made by Commissioner Goldblum.
Okay, Commissioner Jefferson.
I agree with John, and I think the process that landmarks are, the landmark process is simple. You just follow the rules. It's not that complicated, and it really annoys me that they do something and then you have to compromise on that, and we compromise, and compromising just leads to less. I would let the staff decide how to make this better. Thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Lutfi. And it's not letting me unmute you. It's making me request to unmute you. Thanks.
Okay, am I in? Okay, I have to say that I agree with Michael and John. I mean, it is very disappointing. The bay in the front is a huge compromise, and it definitely needs to be addressed. But I also agree that it doesn't hold to the the building doesn't hold together as well. And the back of the building, in the original design, the back was nice. I mean, it looked like it could have been the front of a building. And this looks like, to me, that there was a building here that they made changes to that didn't make sense in the back. So I'm sorry, I agree that there are more changes that have to be made.
Okay. And along the lines of Commissioner Goldblum's suggestions. Okay, Commissioner Bland?
Michael Goldblum introduced the word squinting, and I want to talk about squinting. And Addie said, in the scheme of things, she didn't use squint, but if you squint at this, it's not so different, really. And then you pick apart the details and you realize that this applicant offended the commission greatly in ignoring what we had initially approved. To me, what all of this represents is a bigger problem and a bigger challenge, and that is it's very hard to do a building today that is meant to evoke neighbors that were built 100 years ago in some cases, with different kinds of craftsmen, different kinds of financing. Everything was different, and it always comes off shallow and ersatz. And I think this was ersatz to begin with. I would have much preferred, frankly, I know this is not our mandate, a good contemporary building here. A quality contemporary building would have been so much better than this ersatz thing. Now, back to Jermaine. I just had to get that off my chest. Back to what matters. I don't have any, I don't like to sputter around and fix this detail and that detail. But given this situation, I think Michael Goldblum's series of suggestions is probably as good as any. But this is troubling it at a little scale, but for me, it's much more troubling at a larger scale to try to emulate, to really create. And I think the landmark kind of rules, unfortunately, sort of suggest this too often. Well, what are your neighbors doing? What are they? That's not, to me, that's not good architecture. What good architecture is different. And a good piece of architecture can fit in almost anywhere. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I echo the sentiment. I think I agree with the comments for my fellow commissioners. The word is really unfortunate. And I would just again echo what the commissioners have said, that they really need to work with the staff to really make adjustment to this. This is being butchered.
Okay, Commissioner Devonshire?
Thanks, Sarah. I really want to be polite, but I'm as frustrated and disappointed as my colleagues are. For one, just the fundamental thing that there are 10 people who sit at that table volunteering their time every week and are reviewing and approving or not approving things like this. And then for the owner, the architect, to at some point say, well, okay, screw the Landmarks Commission, really, really upsets me. That aside, I disagree with Fred somewhat. This creation in the hands of, for example, an architect like Peter Penoyer could have been a spectacular design, and it could have been very well executed. There are craftsmen who can do this kind of work. They're all over the place. They just need to get hired. That said, we began with something that was nearly an English cottage style building. And, when I look at that rear facade, it's what Clem Lebine would refer to as a remodeling. It went from nearly English cottage style to no style. And so fundamentally, I'm for everything that Michael Goldblum called for, the fascia, the chimney, everything else. I think that front bay is in a word, ludicrous. If the applicant is saying that they thought about putting in wood trim but didn't think it would be great, then let them put in wood trim and let us review that and make a decision then. But fundamentally, as far as I'm concerned, they need to go back to the original design.
Okay. And Commissioner Chapin or Commissioner Holford Smith, are you comfortable talking now, both in terms of the technical difficulties as well as listening to other commissioners? I'll start with Commissioner Holford Smith.
Yes, I apologize. Is this better?
Yes, it's great.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Well, I was starting to say that I agree with Commissioner Goldblum and his comments. They're very, very good suggestions for how to fix this, which really needs fixing. And I think that the bay is the most egregious. And looking at the plan of the framing for it, as he pointed out, it seems like the center window could have been much wider. And you could have then perhaps added some trim to cover the joint between the three disparate windows, but they decided to put quite a lot of framing in between. So I think that they could enlarge that center window in order to make up the difference. But I think all the other suggestions should be taken by the owner. Very disappointing.
Okay. All right, great. And Commissioner Chapin? Commissioner Chapin, if you want to speak, you could just have to
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you. I also agree that the changes that Commissioner Goldblum suggested would improve the building. I just look on this in general as this district has beautiful examples of architecture. In some cases, there are some, there's some buildings that aren't particularly impressive that became part of the district. That's the reality. There's some that are not contributing. This was a positive choice to add to this historic district. And the owner builder chose to build here, to build a new building. This isn't something that was a modification of existing thing and you sort of, did this and did that. And there's an obligation to try to make this really work well in the district. And as the other commissioners have commented, and we all know, we work very hard with architects, especially some who may be not so familiar with the district they're working in, to really spend a lot of time with them to make sure that this can be a good contributing building. In this case, you ended up with a back, which is very undistinguished and homogenized, hasn't really got any character. You've got windows on the front that really don't fit well in the district. You've got heavy eaves that need to be altered. In short, you really built a building that's kind of a hodgepodge and was not successful. And really all that needed to be done was to follow the guidelines of the commission or to come back and propose something different. I can't afford to put in a bay window. I'm going to put in individual windows, which is what the architect said, that the owner, that was part of the owner's reasoning. Maybe a smaller building should have been built if it couldn't, a larger one couldn't be afforded. What are we really doing here? Anyway, I think that all the comments as far as making changes are good comments, but I don't think that this building is a successful contribution to the district.
Okay. All right, so I definitely hear a lot of disappointment, which is well deserved. I think that, as Commissioner Devonshire said, this is a body of volunteer commissioners who dedicate their time to evaluating these proposals and making sure that these changes to historic districts are appropriate. And so it's very disappointing after that commitment and dedication to the city to have the sort of the approval not followed. But I think we are at a point where we have enough votes to approve amending the application by legalizing some aspects, approving modifications that the applicant is proposing, as well as requiring other modifications of our own, namely the removal of the pork chops at the eaves and restoring the eave lines, addressing the bay window at the front, either with a larger center window or wood mullions that are better proportioned and detailed, adding a fascia board at the rear facade and wood trim at the rear facade to give some depth and articulation to that facade. And Commissioner Goldblum, since those were largely your suggestions, would you make this motion and add those to the end of the motion?
Yes, sure. Regarding 320 Kenmore Road in the Douglaston Historic District, the application is to modify and legalize work completed in noncompliance with the C of A 19-12-178. I note that the building is a new English cottage style inspired house built in 2017 on a recently subdivided lot that features a historic English cottage style garage, which is associated with a historic house at an adjoining lot. That the garage's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Douglaston Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the simplified door surround masonry piers at the bay window, or not. Let's start that again. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the simplified door surround and change in proportions and details of the features, the end gables and dormer at the front facade do not uncall or do intention themselves or detract from the overall design of the building, that the windows, which were not installed as approved, are nearly flush at the front facade. However, they are typically adjacent to wood trim that helps provide depth and details to the openings in some locations, that the vent at the east facade is set back and finished to match the surrounding masonry is typical of such elements found at secondary facades throughout the district, that the change in elevation and proportions of the rear facade follows the topography of the landscape setting of the site, which is a significant feature of the historic district and is then only perceptible from public thoroughfares in the context of secondary facades. And the proposed modifications, including installing longer wood sills, adding corbelling to a chimney, reducing the size of the eave returns at the front facade, and relocating select leaders to secondary facades will eliminate some features that detract from the streetscape and historic district. However, I recommend that the applicant work with staff to make the following changes to have the design of the house more closely adhere to the approved design. First, that the applicant will work with the staff to modify the front bay window to eliminate the stucco pillars separating the windows, whether this is by replacing the entire unit with a single continuous 3-light unit, or in some other manner that reduces the thickness of those piers and fosters the impression of a continuous bay. They will add a fascia board and trim, flush trim at the back facade and side facades under the 1-story extension to improve the relationship of the rear windows to each other and to the underside of the roof in a way that is more similar to the approved drawing. They will remove any of the infilled eaves on any facade so that all the eaves are consistent. I think that's it.
I think that's it. Okay. And Commissioner Devonshire, would you second that motion?
I second.
Okay. All right, Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Nay.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson, Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye. Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi, Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 10 in favor and 1 opposed, the motion carries.
Okay, so that's approved with some modifications, and the applicant must work carefully with staff to execute a new set of modifications that would address these concerns, and hopefully those will be executed in compliance with the new certificate of appropriate, or the amendment to the certificate of appropriateness. Okay, we'll move to the next item.
Second public hearing item is item number 2, LPC 20-10.
Corey,
For your audio.
there's some echo.
That sounds better.
Mhm.
I have to bow out of this one.
Okay.
Maybe ask Caroline what it is to read the next one.
Okay, Caroline, can you please read the next item into the record? And as while we're switching that, I will just note for the record that Commissioner Goldblum and Commissioner Bland are going to be recused on this item.
Okay, I'll read it into the record. An office building designed by a consortium of architects known as the Associated Architects, with portions designed by a group of fine artists, built in 1938 as part of an Art Deco style office, commercial, and entertainment complex. The application is to modify openings and replace storefront and entry of infill. And this was reviewed at a recent public hearing, and it's most of the proposal was approved with the exception of 50 Rockefeller Plaza. And I guess that's it.
The applicants have joined. Motion.
Okay, and we'll need to make a motion to open the proceedings. So Commissioner Holford Smith, would you make that motion?
So moved.
And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
Okay, and commissioners, I've asked to unmute many of you, so just accept that so we can call the vote to open the proceedings. Okay, and
I just need a moment. I'm having a small technical difficulty. Just stand by just one moment, please. Sorry.
And Sarah, can I just remind everybody, so this is actually an amendment to something that an action had been taken on for the other portion of the site.
okay, so all in favor of opening the proceedings to allow the applicant to speak, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so as Caroline said, that we saw an application to make modifications to many storefronts within Rockefeller Center, and we took action and approved the majority of that application. The one remaining question was one of the storefronts at 50 Rockefeller Plaza, and the applicants are back today with some additional information and a revised proposal for that one bay. All right, so with that, I think we can turn it over to the applicant.
And we're just having difficulty with the full screen, so if the applicant can just begin.
Hi, can you all
Yes.
hear me all right?
Yes.
Hello?
Cass, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Hi, this is Cass Stackelberg of Higgins Quays Barth and Partners, and I'm joined joined by E.B. Kelly of Tishman Speyer, as well as Kim Shepard and Michael Gablini of Gablini Shepard Architects. I'm going to run through the presentation, and E.B., Michael, and Kim are available, obviously, for questions and any discussion after the design presentation. I think I have control of this now. So, okay, this is not the last version, the up-to-date version of our presentation. Is it possible for me to share my screen? This is I have it open on my desktop and I could share it. I'm just reluctant to go through this because it's missing some of the details that we've been working on.
Edith, if we allow the applicant to share his screen, will we be able to get back to our screen for the next item?
Yes, we can definitely do that. I will just
Although,
then.
I think that I think as a safety measure, we don't. You have to be a co-host to share a screen.
Okay, well, I can run through this and do my best. There, I do have a share screen option on my Zoom view, but I understand you have your protocol. So,
well, do you want to try it and see if it works, Cass?
Yeah, I think it will work. I know that based on, we had discussions with the staff about some of the detailing that we've incorporated into the set. So I'm concerned that that's not actually in this presentation.
I've ended the share if you want to try with the presentation on your end.
Okay, it says host disabled attendee screen sharing. So I think that's not an option. Is there a way for us to send a link to Edith? Sarah Ripple, maybe if you're listening, we can load that quickly.
I don't know if that may take longer, Cass. Okay. I don't know if you can just work with what.
Let's work with what we've got. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll go back to the presentation that I was given. Just
okay.
A moment.
Yep. Okay, terrific.
And let me just then give you control again.
Okay, terrific, great, very good. So as Caroline described, this is the application that we brought to you back in the beginning of May. This is specific to a program for operable storefronts. And we shared with you at that time 3 different buildings, 1 Rockefeller Plaza, 45 Rockefeller Plaza, and 50 Rockefeller Plaza. At the hearing, you voted to approve the changes at 1 and 45 Rockefeller Plaza, but of the 3 bays that we were proposing work at 50 Rockefeller Plaza, one of those 3 you asked us to look at and come back and present a design revision. So we'd like to present the design revision, but in addition, we also want to share with you some new historic documentation that we think actually supports these design changes that we didn't have for you at the previous public hearing. The next slide illustrates the ground floor plan of 50 Rockefeller Plaza in 1938, when the building's construction began. This is Rockefeller Plaza here, 50th Street and 51st Street. The building lobby is located here. This curving element is actually the underground drive that passes below the building lobby and services the whole complex. This quadrant here of the building, I want to draw particular attention to. This was shown in this original plan as a single commercial space that included this area, but also this area here. And if you can see right where I have the cursor, there's a storefront window shown in plan. But what's interesting, and this sort of goes to the discussions that we've been having about the storefronts and the changeability and the reactions to the Depression, actually, while this space was planned for a single tenant, when it was actually constructed, this space was demised separately from this space. So there was actually a separate tenant here. And in this photograph, as you can see, sorry, let's try and advance. In this photograph from 1939, sort of just as the building opened, you can see that there's a figure standing right here in an entryway. This was a storefront entry that was created when that bay was sectioned off from the overall main commercial space. And it sort of obviously is a sign of the sort of Depression era commercial and leasing needs that this space became its own element. A better photo perhaps is from 1940. We know that the Noguchi sculpture News, which is situated directly over the building entry on the plaza, was installed in April 1940. So this photo is just maybe February, March while they're installing the artwork. And this is the bay in question. So what we've learned actually is that the original condition for this building had a storefront in this bay. And in this detail photo, you can see that there's a light statuary bronze door and then a show window with a granite base. This is supporting hoarding that was used to actually transport the stainless steel panels for the sculpture. But it's been interesting to see the distinction between that original plan, which showed a storefront window, to the actual original photograph right when the building opened that showed a door as part of a separate storefront. This is a 1980s photo from the time of designation. This bay is on the return panel, and this is the storefront bay. You can also see that this bay has changed. This was a single storefront window, but by 1985, this had been divided. And then a detailed photo here, again, showing that single door here in the storefront bay. And then this bay here, which is actually associated with the bank tenant at the time, this had changed as well. So all of this is to say that the conditions, particularly across the storefronts, as we documented as part of that discussion about the master plan, have been evolving and changing since the earliest days of all of these buildings. So this slide then is sort of an overview of the building. It's a 15-story commercial building with these two 5-story wings on the north and south sides. The areas of work here are at these 3 bays. These 2 bays you had reviewed and were comfortable with. It is this bay that we're talking about in terms of the design revisions. Existing photos, again, a montage of existing photos across the building. These 2 bays are the southern wing, the northern wing, and then these central 3 bays recessed at the building entry. And then some detailed photos here. And just to point out how there are different treatments. So these bays here, the sill terminates within this field of the granite water table, whereas this bay here, bay number 3, bay number 4 here, photo 4, the sill terminates on top of the granite. So there's subtle variations that occur across the base of the building. I think this is another existing photo. This is not loading. I will continue. Okay.
That should work now. Apologies, I'm having some connection issues on my end, so I apologize for the,
yeah, so
there may be some delays and some memory issues on the laptop.
Okay.
Apologies.
Yep. So when there's an image here that is what we showed you at the beginning of May, hopefully that will load in a moment. This is an existing view across the top of the image. Edith, is your screen resolving, or are we?
I am seeing the elevation rendering at the top and then a key at the bottom. Are you trying to advance to the next slide?
No, there should be a rendering below it. Okay, let me advance and see what's on the next slide. I can tell you about our design revision.
Okay, let me just try to close a few other things I have open and see if that helps. Just give me a moment. I'm just going to mute and go off the.
Okay. So this is.
Let's try that.
Okay, good. So this is the design revision that, sorry, this is the design proposal we shared with you in the beginning of May. And this bay is the bay that we're focusing on. So currently there's a window and a sill. We know that the existing condition is actually not the historic condition, as illustrated by the photographs at the beginning of the presentation. This historically was its own independent storefront bay with an entry. The proposal that we shared with you previously removed the granite base and introduced 4 vertical panels, a swing door and 3 sliding doors. And the comments at the public hearing was that most of the commissioners felt that the vertical orientation of these individual panels disrupted this bay. It was a sort of a foreign element, these vertical mullions, as compared with the other bays. So in response, we've looked at the design or the historic documentation and revised the design. This is an existing elevation. Again, these 2 bays, and this bay is the bay that we are proposing changes. This is what you saw before with the vertical divisions. And then our new proposal. So again, this is an existing image across the top of the base of the building from 50th to 51st Street. And our proposal is to insert a pair of bronze finished, light bronze finished doors at the center of the bay. Consistent with the material and configuration of some of the other doors at the entry, the return, there's a swing door, and some of the doors set within the revolving door housings. So this is the design revision, working with the vocabulary of the building. And then another rendered view at an angle, a sort of detailed view of the existing across the top, and the proposed view across the bottom with the light statuary bronze doors. I think we're...
Again, just apologies for this.
Edith, would you like me to try to share the screen off my computer?
I think we may need to do that. Yes, apologies.
Corey, is there any way that you can pull up the most current version, because we have updated details that are more accurate to what we're proposing?
I'll try. I'm not sure what I'll have access to. Let me give it a shot.
Sorry all for the delay here.
Is it being shared currently?
We've got the title slide. Great. Yes.
Hold on a second, Cass. I'm going to try to give you the control right now.
Okay. Okay, I think I have it. Let's see. The slides aren't advancing. I think I'm moving the image, but not, maybe if you go into, let's see. This is the right presentation. Terrific.
Try it now, Cass. If you try your arrow keys, you may be able to just flip them.
Yeah, I'm just scrolling. That's working. Okay, so I'll continue. Existing photos, we basically passed through this part of the presentation. I won't go back. Our design revision, again, with the pair of doors, pair of bronze doors, and then comparative elevation. So I think this is where we left off. So again, an existing elevation across the top, across the base of the building, and a proposed elevation across the bottom with the new swing doors set at the center of the bay adjacent to the building entry. And then a series of detail elevations. Again, the southern half of the elevation with the proposed condition here. Again, the proportion of these doors. The finish is taken from the historic doors that were in this location as well as elsewhere around the base of the building. And then another detail elevation, existing conditions, and proposed. A few things just to point out. We are not changing the proportion of these or size of these lights here or here. They will match with the bays just north of the building entry, so that reading will remain. And these double doors are set within the granite base. From that 2000 photo, you could see that where the door had been, this is all new granite, and there had been replacement granite here. So we're looking to actually preserve the historic granite and only removing granite that was installed after 2000. And then finally, some comparative section details for the storefront bay. This is a section cut through the window at present and proposed through the door. So removal of the granite at the center of the bay and a bronze door in place. And then comparative detail elevations just to indicate this 3-inch mullion dimension. Will be maintaining the mullion profile and dimension up at the head of this tall second light, as well as the head of the door. These profiles will match what is existing along with the dimensions. And then a plan section, again, cut through the storefront window and a proposed plan section with the doors at center and the windows, storefront windows on either side. And then a detailed jam section. Again, the dimensions will and profile will match the framing elements, the 3-inch framing elements that exist today. These last section details are actually the 2 bays to the south that you had seen before and did not have a concern with. This is taking the fixed window and making the lower panel a single hung and removing the 12-inch granite sill here to have this entry at the sidewalk grade, and then a plan section of the same. So I'll scroll back up to one of the renderings just to probably more clearly illustrate the changes. But I think overall, these changes, which we think are derived from the historic documentation that we've found since the public hearing, are really of the same type and scope of the storefront changes seen across the base of this building as well as many other buildings in Rockefeller Center. And we feel that this change is a solid response and an appropriate modification to this single bay that you asked us to revisit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So I know we have some questions. So Commissioner Shamir Baran, please
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
So Cass, just to confirm,
Yes.
the windows that I was so excited about the last time you presented that were actually these kind of giant double hungs and eliminated the granite at the base and came all the way down to the bottom to the street are still ones that you're proposing in the other location. I'm just confirming that, so answer that in a moment. And then secondly, it looks like from the historic photographs or recent historic photographs, but actually even the one with the installation of the Noguchi sculpture, that the door that may have been in the window that you're wanting to modify now was not centered. There wasn't a double door in the center, it was on the right side. And so I'm wondering, so I'm wondering why not, if at all, and I'm not sure that others agree that we should have doors there, why not have those not be centered so that they don't compete in a sense or are other than the central doors that are underneath the sculpture and that recall more directly the relatively recent historic presence of those kind of doors?
Sure. So I'll answer the first part of your question, which is really focused on these 2 bays. There is no change to the presentation or proposal that we shared with you in May. So this will be the same detail with a sort of single hung panel here and here. We're not proposing any changes here. This is the bay really that includes the design revision. And I might have Michael just respond to the positioning of these doors. I think there's an architectural rationale for their location. Michael, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, hello commissioners. This is Michael Gabellini of Gabellini Shepherd. And the rationale going through it, and of course, seeing and looking back at the existing store, which was there. Existing store, which is there, was documented, was a newspaper stand So of course the bay window and that type of the offset right-sided door that was indicated in the photograph, and then through time, that was something which was determined typologically because of its nature as a newspaper stand. The use for this is going to be a coffee shop cafe. It does need to have more than one leaf as a door to just be able to operationally enhance the flow of people going in and out, and also with outdoor seating, which is proposed in the prior plan and also reviewed with you in our last meeting. So the purpose of this is, because of this use, is that there's an operational need, and because of that, then centering a two-door option for an in and out movement, and also tying that to other double door center storefronts throughout the campus.
I think, just to pick up on Michael's comment, I think that's an important point at the end, is that you may or may not remember from our previous master plan presentation, but where there are double doors, which is a type that exists, they are centered. This is on other buildings, of course, but so part of fitting within this sort of typology we felt was also important for elements seen elsewhere in the center.
All right, any other questions? All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. And before we move to our discussion, Rich, have we received any written comments on this public meeting item?
No, we haven't received no additional public hearing comments.
Okay. All right, so thank you, Cass and Michael, and we're gonna now begin our discussion. So commissioners, I'm gonna start unmuting you, some of you, because of the update, I'll have to request that. And we'll start the discussion. And so as you recall, we approved a number of window changes. At 50 Rockefeller Plaza, the commission was being presented the modifications to these three openings. The commission supported the two windows that will operate like large double hungs, but this, as Cass said, this was the one bay that we asked the applicants to restudy, and they're back with some new information about the historic nature of this storefront. So with that in mind, let's start the discussion. Commissioner Lutfi, would you like to start this?
Sure. Thank you for the additional research information. I think it's very helpful. I think this makes sense. I think it makes sense. I feel like the facade of the building at the street works well together with the placement of these doors, and I think the flow between these two locations also makes sense. So I'm okay with it.
Okay, Commissioner Chen.
Mute. Okay. I agree with the Commissioner Lufty's comment. I think this is a much improved over last time.
Okay, Commissioner Devonshire.
I can approve this.
Okay, Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I had initially had a similar concern as the commissioner, as Adi did, about possibly the double doors, bronze doors, so near to the central doors, to sort of not, drawing too much attention to themselves. But I think that given that double doors are necessary, that it makes sense to have them centered, and obviously they're bronze generally throughout. And, with large Noguchi sculpture, when you move back from it, I think it's not going to be any kind of issue. So, I can approve this as presented. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith.
I had a similar hesitation regarding the centeredness of the doors, and would have preferred to see a single door to the right, but I understand functionally that would be a hardship, and this does comply with the master plan, so I am willing to accept it.
Okay, Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Yeah, I'm still having problems with this, and I completely understand the functional, despite the fact that it's outside of our purview scope of the need for a double door. I just would have much more preferred either, putting aside the possibility of a single door as it might have been to one side or the other, a completely different proposal, which would have made this thing look more like an all glass and potentially darkened bronze lines down to the ground, meaning that the entire, or a door configuration that was not bronze and referenced somehow the granite base in it with a dark gray or a dark or some kind of a darkened bronze kick or kind of bulkhead-like image, so that it read like the window on the other side, a little bit more like the window on the other side of the Noguchi opening. So I'm still struggling with this. I mean, of course, everything, the scale of this development and of the granite and of the stone and of the Noguchi thing, dwarf all of these other smaller things. But I just think that the kind of the architectural gesture of taking these large glass kind of horizontal panels almost all the way down to the ground and then to the kick is something that's so it's so dominant on the other side of the sculpture that I just feel like the bronze doors don't do it. So I'm still struggling with it.
All right, Commissioner Gustafson.
Appropriate as is.
And Commissioner Jefferson.
I support the proposal.
Okay. All right. Well, certainly doing something that receded from and read more as a window would have been one approach, and I think I would have found that appropriate as well. But I too find this appropriate given the master plan throughout the complex and the history within this particular bay. So I think we do have enough to approve this at this point. So Commissioner Lutfi, would you read this motion?
Sure. In the matter of docket 20-10728, 50 Rockefeller Plaza, Rockefeller Center, individual landmark, an office building designed by a consortium of architects known as the Associated Architects, with portions designed by a group of fine artists, built in 1938 as part of an Art Deco style office, commercial, and entertainment complex. The application is to modify openings and replace storefront and entry infill. I note that while historic drawings illustrate a single fixed display window above a granite base at the south bay, at the recessed portion of the building's east facade, recently discovered historic photographs evidence that as built, this bay contained a display window and a bronze and glass swing door, that the door and granite base were subsequently removed, and that the granite base was later restored below a new fixed display window. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed installation of operable storefront windows at 50 Rockefeller Plaza is limited to specific locations facing onto Rockefeller Plaza and reflects the historic programmatic goal of creating a vibrant gathering place with ease of movement by pedestrians and patrons between public and commercial spaces at the landmark site. That the removal of the granite bulkheads at the two southernmost storefronts will be visually unobtrusive due to their existing low heights as a result of the rising sidewalk grade at this location, and that the new single light, single hung display windows and single light transoms at these storefronts will maintain the overall historic proportions and configuration of the storefront infill at these and the surrounding bays, including the large expanses of glass and single horizontal mullions. That the changes to the southern storefront bay at the recessed portion of the facade will not eliminate historic fabric, and the installation of an entry at this bay will recall the historic condition evidenced in photographs and maintain the historic alignment of the horizontal mullions at this bay and the sister bay to the north of this facade. That the changes to retail entry configurations, including the introduction of flush door installations and the replacement of a revolving door with a swing door, will accommodate barrier-free access at these select retail spaces. That the bronze, steel, glass, and granite materials, including frames with a statuary finish and polished bronze doors with single glazed panels, match those of historic storefronts and entries at this building and other buildings at the landmark. And that therefore the work will blend unobtrusively with the surrounding architectural features at the building and the landmark site.
Okay, and Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that motion? Where are you? Here you go.
Second.
Okay. Rich, will you call the vote?
Yes. Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Reluctantly, nay.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 8 in favor and 1 opposed, the motion carries.
Thank you. And just again to note for the record that Commissioner Bland and Commissioner Goldblum were recused on this item. And we'll now move to the next item.
Thank you very much.
Okay, sorry for the technical difficulties. Assuming you can hear me, I will read in item number 3. This is LPC 20-02539, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 644, Lot 60, 55 Gansevoort Street in the Gansevoort Market Historic District. Vernacular store and lofts building designed by Joseph M. Dunn and built in 1887. The application is to modify a canopy and install a sidewalk cafe. And I do want to just note that at the public hearing of January 21st, 2020, there was a consensus of support for the changes to the canopy roof and the presence of a sidewalk cafe at the base of the building. However, the commissioners asked the applicants to restudy the design and configuration of the sidewalk cafe elements as well as the lighting. So the applicant team is here to present their revisions to the proposal.
Okay, and we'll have to ask, I'm going to make a motion to open the proceedings. So Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Commissioner Devonshire, would you second that?
Second.
Oh, all right. And some commissioners, again, you may have to request my ask to unmute you. And we'll call a vote on opening the proceedings. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the applicants may speak.
Good afternoon, commissioners and LPC staff. My name is Jackie Prudu-Vallon. I'm the preservation consultant for this project. Thank you for hearing this application today, and thank you for continuing to serve our city during this difficult time. As Corey noted, this application for a sidewalk cafe at 55 Gansevoort Street, which was located on the north side of the street between 9th and Washington, you last saw on January 21st. Sorry, I better advance my slides before I give you the whole presentation. You know what? It's not advancing for me when I hit the buttons.
So you should use the arrow keys if you can see those at the top of the screen here.
Oh.
We're having a full screen issue.
Okay.
Are you seeing the, yeah, there you go.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So what you're seeing on this slide is the rendering of the current proposal. This is the building, full facade, and that's its location on the map. This is just a cheat sheet to let commissioners know what your comments were at the last hearing and what we've specifically addressed in this proposal. So let's see. Let's move on to, okay. So this is the rendering the south elevation that you saw on January 21st. Please note that it was discovered after the hearing that the heights of the planters and hedges had been incorrectly rendered at 39 inches high overall. Basically, a mistake had been made in the 3D model. So the planters were rendered too tall. The hedges and planters were then and are now proposed to be 30 inches tall. And here's the new proposal. This is, this is our response to commissioner comments, which were that you wanted to see it be more lightweight and transparent by spacing out the planters that were parallel to the street and by removing the planters that had been placed perpendicular to the facade. Commissioners also commented on the lighting and instructed us to remove the uplights that were shown and to electrify the hanging lanterns that had been shown as gas lanterns. Let's see. So you'll see in this proposal that the perpendicular planters have been removed, as well as the square intermediate planters, allowing a more unobstructed view of the facade. The uplights were eliminated and the hanging lanterns are now electrified and are 6 inches smaller than previously shown. Here for your comparison are the previously presented south elevation on top and the current proposal below. Here's the previous sidewalk plan and the new proposed on the bottom. On the proposed plan, you can see the removal of the planters, which commissioners said created too solid a presence on the sidewalk. Here's the previous section that was shown at the restaurant entrance. And here is the current section through the restaurant entrance. Note the now electrified lanterns have been reduced in size by 6 inches, as I noted before, and they will hang from a solid channel. Here's an elevation drawing just to show you how the sidewalk slopes down at the western end in front of the facade. This is the previous section through the hotel entry, and this is the current proposed section. Here is the previously proposed gas lantern and the now proposed electric lantern. We believe these simple metal frames with transparent glass will just disappear against the storefronts. Here's a close-up of the previous proposal and a close-up elevation of the current. Note the remaining planters are aligned with the storefront openings, but the space in between reveals the cast iron pilasters. Here's a rendering that was shown to you on January 21st, looking east. And here's the revised rendering looking east. Please note the height of the planters are now correctly shown. We believe that by removing planters, we've broken up the solids that commissioners were objecting to, and thereby removed the visual impediments to reading the facade. There are still 4 square planters shown at the ramp in front of the guest house entrance. Here's the proposed view looking west. This is not a view that was prepared for the last hearing, so I don't have a comparison at this angle. Here again is the proposed south elevation for your reference. Here's a view that had been previously shown looking east, and the revised view looking east. And finally, that view looking west again. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions on this item? All right, not seeing any hands raised. I'm just going to see if we've received any written comments on this public meeting item. Rich, did we receive anything?
We've received nothing additional for this application.
Okay, thank you. All right. So I think if I don't see any questions, then we can move to our discussion. And I'm just going to start to unmute all of you again. Some of you may need to accept that request. But this was, an application for a sidewalk cafe, and the features that support the sidewalk cafe. And really the comments last time were that the planters created a barrier in front of the building, and we wanted to see more porosity and fluidity between the sidewalk and the front of the building. And the applicants have responded by breaking the planters up. And I think they do read now as much more like discrete elements in front of the building. There were also comments about the type of illumination in the lanterns, which are otherwise very simple and transparent. And I think this is fairly responsive. Why don't I start across the table to see how others feel? Commissioner Chapin, would you like to start on this one?
Thank you. I agree. I think that they have responded to our comments, and that in regards to both the lighting and making the planters more transparent. So I can prove it as presented.
Great. Commissioner Holford Smith?
I agree. I think they did respond nicely to our comments to lighten up the enclosures. I still find it a little bit too formal for this district, but I'm going to approve it.
Okay. Commissioner Shamir Barron?
I can approve it.
Okay. Commissioner Gustafson?
Appropriate as is.
Commissioner Jefferson?
I think it's a very good project. Very nice presentation. And I think the interesting about these perspectives to me is that it captures the mood of the place. I think it's very good.
Okay. Commissioner Lutfi?
Wait a minute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Actually, I think these were very good changes. The planters before were like an obstruction, and it felt like it was something you would see in the suburbs or on Long Island, or it seems much more accessible now, and I think it blends in more with the surroundings.
Okay. Commissioner Bland?
Yes, approvable.
Commissioner Chen? You're.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
I think it's approvable, but I do agree with Ann that it's still a little bit formal, but the overhead lighting has been reduced and is more appropriate this time.
Okay, and Commissioner Devonshire?
I agree with Ann as well. I mean, the character of the neighborhood has changed greatly, but I can approve it.
And Commissioner Goldblum?
I'm gonna not comment because I unfortunately missed the beginning.
Okay. All right, and so I think we have support to approve this as is. So Commissioner Gustafson, would you make that motion?
In the matter of LPC 20-02539, 55 Gansevoort Street in the Gansevoort Market Historic District, a vernacular store and loft building designed by Joseph M. Dunn and built 1887. The application is to modify a canopy and install a sidewalk cafe. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Gansevoort Market Historic District. I recommend approval, noting that the work will not damage or destroy any significant architectural features of the building, that the proposed gray tinted glass panels at the canopy roof will recall the darker underside of traditional solid metal roofing found at sidewalk canopies in this historic district, that the pendant light fixtures will have an open see-through quality that does not call attention to themselves, that the sidewalk cafe decking and solid black painted planters are not fixed to the sidewalk or the building and are easy to remove, that the staggered configuration of the solid wood planters parallel to the building will help maintain a sense of openness and transparency at the storefront and the sidewalk, and that the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the historic district.
And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire. Commissioner Devonshire.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Abstain.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 10 in favor, none opposed, and 1 abstain, the motion carries.
Okay.
Thank you, commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you and good luck. And we'll move to the next and final item.
Yes, this is item number 4, LPC 20-05782, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1832, lot 29. 361 Central Park West, First Church of Christ Scientist of New York City, individual landmark. A Beaux-Arts classical style church designed by Carrere and Hastings and built in 1899 to 1903. The application is to construct additions, replace windows, alter entrances and replace doors, install signage, and excavate at the cellar. Please note that at the public meeting of March 3rd, 2020, there was a consensus of support for the concept of adapting the former church building for use as a museum. However, the commissioners asked the applicants to restudy the design and massing of the rooftop addition, bulkhead, and other rooftop elements and reduce their visibility. Most commissioners also asked that more of the non-iconographic stained glass be retained at the special windows and the smaller divisions of the lead caming be replicated. Some commissioners also asked that the removal of stairs and the design of new entrances along Central Park West be further studied. And lastly, some commissioners asked that the signage be reduced in number and or size. The applicant team is here to present their revisions to the proposal.
Great, can you guys hear me?
Sorry, can you just hang on one moment? And Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
Seconded.
Okay, and some of you may have to again request my, accept my request to unmute you, and we'll call a vote to open the proceedings. All in favor of opening the proceedings?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so now you may go ahead.
You guys can hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm Matt Messinger, co-chair of CMOM's board of directors. I want to thank the commissioners and their team in advance for their time today and for their continued review of the project. We believe that the dialogue with LPC and members of the community board and its preservation committee has led to a better design. The public health crisis and social justice turmoil that's gripped our city over the past weeks has brought new urgency to CMOM's mission, which of course provides access to innovative, engaging programs and resources for New York City children and their families. Like so many institutions, the museum has had to quickly pivot and work with its partners to help provide for those who most need its programming. We know that investment in early childhood leads to successful, happier, and healthier children and young adults. As a museum dedicated to early childhood, CMOM plays a critical role in the development of our next generation of global citizens here in New York. Our plan to move to a new expanded home, our first expansion in 40 years, responds directly to the need of the children and families of New York City and beyond. To that end, I'm happy to share that last week we announced the appointment of our new CEO and director, Aileen Everin. Aileen joined us from Prep for Prep, where she has worked for some 25 years, helping underserved students of color achieve academic, personal, and professional success. Her belief in access and equity in education and her dedication to our city's youth is a perfect match for our institution. Together with our current team and board, she will lead the museum into its exciting next chapter as we continue to plan for our new expanded home, now needed more than ever. And with that, I'll let Celia Smith from FX Collaborative walk you through the finer points of our revised design.
You may need to unmute yourself, Sylvia.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. And Sylvia, if you just go ahead, that would be great.
All right, thank you. We're pleased to be back in front of you. We have worked very closely with CMOM to make revisions, updates to our design. Go ahead, Steve. Steve, can you advance? Can you? Thank you.
as Corey stated, we're looking at the areas of discussion last week. By way of introduction, I just want to say that we have kept to the very important project goals to celebrate the building, make it part of the museum, not only housing the museum, but being part of its story, to make this landmark into an active place that's welcoming and graceful in its receiving of people, and fundamentally to maximize daylight and views and connection to the city. And the approach to the terraces is an important aspect of that. And then fundamentally do this in a sustainable and environmentally conscious way. I'm going to walk you through the entries first, and then discuss the stained glass, the roof, and then the signage. Go ahead, Steve. The exterior of the building is landmarked. Obviously, we're focused on the exterior, but I want to reiterate that for us, the exterior and the interior work together. So as we've continued with the design, we've sought ways that carry forward that character and quality of the interior with its barrel vault and move that up through the building. Fundamentally, though, we will be restoring the granite exterior and not doing anything to change that. Go ahead, Steve. The way that we unlocked our approach to this building was rethinking the elevator connection from the top to the bottom of the building. We are maintaining the program stack as we had before. We haven't taken anything away and stuffed it into the interior of the building, but the significant change is really the elevators, pulling the connection from the full core from the first floor to the 6th floor, then shifting to a one-stop elevator at the east end of the building to gain very important access to the terrace. The other significant shift to make that happen was moving of mechanical elements and so forth, and I'll talk about that further. That allowed us to lower the bulkhead, also the workshop performance space at the top of the building. So again, we kept that spirit of the community space at the top of the building, centered on the steeple. Go ahead, Steve. I'm going to begin with the entries, showing you the existing elevation. Go ahead. The slope in the sidewalk, as you know, prevented us from easy flow into the building. In order to accommodate that slope, as I explained in the first hearing, we lowered the east end of the first floor and are accommodating those changes of elevation within the building. Now, this is important not only for ADA mandated accessibility. This is actually very important for the audience of the Children's Museum, many of whom come in strollers. And the flow from the 2 south doors into the building is probably even more important now with the COVID follow-up, that entries and exits should be separate. So those 2 doors are needed for entry with strollers. To further explain, so you understand the building, the public comes in, moves to the ticket, comes across a bridge ramp, and the strollers go to the stroller parking, which is a very important part of the building. So this isn't just nice to have plan. This is a very well worked out strategy that there's a route into the building with strollers, and then the red line shows you the route out. So that's the rationale, a very important functional rationale. It allows us to have graceful entry and as little backup on the sidewalk as possible. Go ahead, Steve. These were the door configurations that we showed in the March hearing, and the comments were it was out of scale, and could we not do something that would introduce more scale? Could we consider having the wood doors hung in the opening and then have glass doors behind? Go ahead, Steve. We looked at the scale first and worked with the wood transom that is over the center door. We extended that. We also re-detailed the doors. It's a wood door with a bronze frame, much more in the crafted character of the building. And then the south and the north doors have a transom, again, matching the center door, working with the hierarchy that the center door is the tallest, and then the two north and south doors are secondary to that center. Go ahead. We looked around for many precedents, and we have been inspired by the New York Historical Society and the way that change in 2011 opened up that facade. And this is the spirit of transparency and openness that we're seeking. Go ahead. A more detailed look at the door. The way the door is positioned, I'll show you details, is we've given a lot of thought to not just the materiality of the door, but how the hardware, how the activators and so forth could be incorporated into the door so that it doesn't, so it can be done in a concealed way and sit well within the opening. Go ahead. This illustrates a couple of points. It shows that on the north and the south doors in particular, we need the full width of the stone opening in order to get our egress dimension. This also shows that we have a bronze frame around the door, and the activators are set in the stone frame. So we're avoiding having to have any pylons or freestanding elements in front of the building. We want to keep this very open and welcoming. Go ahead, Steve. There were questions about how we would address the removal of the stairs and the treatment of the stone. This building has a very strong plinth, a very strong base, and we've studied alternatives to this, but this we've come back to as the right approach. We've done as much analysis as we can without starting to take the steps apart, and it appears that the lower steps are cut around the base of the building. The upper steps are recessed. So we think in the diagrams that we're showing here that we can repair the existing stone actually using the granite of the steps. So it's basically a restoration and then insertion and repair approach. Go ahead. The 96th Street entry will be used for school groups and visitors to the administrative functions. So it too needs to be fully accessible. Our proposal here is to do the glass and wood and bronze doors. And in this case, because this door has very little change in height, is to follow the arch of the stone opening. The next topic are the stained glass windows. We have spent a lot of time with these windows. The major change here is the large east window has been reconsidered with its border, and I'll show you additional drawings on that. But this shows you an overall strategy that keeps the borders on all of the stained glass windows. And that's really something that we see as a key component to the building going forward. The other major point, and we made this before, is we're keeping one of the windows, we're fully restoring it, so it will be there intact, positioned on the northeast corner of the building. This is the large east window. This is the one that has Jesus and Mary Magdalene in the garden, and we would be keeping the full border, again, maintaining the bronze, maintaining the overall frame, but removing the center section of the window, replacing it with clear glass. In the arched windows in both the north and the south, we'd be keeping the border. This is, I think, distinct from the previously approved proposal where it was only on the south windows. We're trying to look at this building in a very holistic, cohesive way. So we want the border maintained on all windows. We've added the lead cane divisions as another element. There was discussion in the hearing about the scale of the windows. I want to point out here that it's very important to us that, again, all elements of the building honor the original, but also the new life as a museum. And there are aspects of this border with the foliage, the birds, and the braided treatment that we would carry forward in other elements. So we want these windows to feel like they're really part of the new life of the building. We were asked to consider whether we could keep the upper section of the center medallion as an element to give scale. Whoops. To give scale to the that upper arch section of the window. You can see here that would further truncate the medallion. So our investigation took us back to keeping the strong border and then replacing the rest with clear glass. The strong border and the arrangement at the bottom. The other aspect of this that I want to point out is the red lines on the left show our floor levels, and where now that medallion is positioned in a way that when you stand in the back of the balcony, you're in it. In fact, you're looking at the center image quite directly. Going forward, in fact, our floor level will be truncating that element. So we'd like to keep the strong border and eliminate the medallion. Go ahead, Steve. This is a detail that we've refined since you saw it last in order to include the lead caming, but it's a high performance exterior double glazed window with the interior light being the stained glass. And then all the profiles, just as we explained before, the bronze profiles, which would match the existing. The windows would be entirely fixed. There are operable units in them now, but we would be fixing the full window. All right, we're going to, I'm going to describe the modifications to the roof. Go ahead, Steve. We went through many steps to rethink the top of the building in order to provide that community functionality and also the special experience at the top. So as I mentioned before, we've gone from being on the roof with our clerestory and the terrace walk to now we're thinking of ourselves as moving into the roof. And in fact, we're very inspired by the existing building's attic space. So as I said before, we eliminated the continuation of the elevator to the terrace level and stopped it at the 6th floor and then made the connection from the 6th floor to the 7th floor with a glass elevator within the steeple. We then were able to lower the bulkhead and then continue the terracotta roof to the footprint of the existing monitor. Go ahead, Steve. This shows in section our previous scheme where we have the clerestory emerging out of the roof line with the monitor defined by a flat roof and then the bulkhead beyond. We now have continued the roof line from the eave to the monitor footprint and taken that profile of the monitor to define what will be a memorable space. So it's smaller, it's much smaller, it's a different experience, but it's still a very special space for the Children's Museum. Go ahead, Steve. This more detailed view shows you the relationship of the different elements. We are raising the roof to actually not to increase the volume of the workshop and performance space, but to accommodate mechanical equipment that we have now moved inside the building. So it's really driven by other functionality. This space is defined by the roof line and the light that we're always looking for is coming from skylights. There are no windows on the south or the north elevation. And you see now the shaped bulkhead for the new core beyond. Go ahead. We thought it would be good to simplify that further. So the red dashed line is the existing profile. The dark line is our current profile. In the background, you see the green of our previous approach. In the longitudinal section, I'm really showing this to show you how the mechanical equipment has been incorporated into the profile of the monitor. Go ahead, Steve. You see the elevator in the steeple. The materials are very much in keeping with the existing building. We are using the same Ludovici terracotta that is on the roof now. We are opening it up at the center to bring light into what we're calling the attic walk, very much like the skylights that are carved into the stair towers. Always looking, as Hastings did, for ways to bring in light. The monitor is clad in a perforated copper. The modulation is based on the 3-foot module that is used throughout the building. And we've discovered that over and over again, the working module. We've scaled the monitor through a rib and a pattern in the copper, and this would be a rain screen construction. Go ahead, Steve. In plan shows the position of the performance space in the center within that footprint of the monitor. You can see the where the elevators stop, and we make the movement either into the performance space or to the glass elevator in the tower. We wove 2 additional stairs, which also drive the height of the monitor. We wove those into the east end of the building. And we brought more mechanical equipment inside, off of the roof. And I could go on and on about that, but it was a good challenge, good puzzle to work with. The roof plan shows the location of those stairs at the east end of the monitor, the position of the elevator. The elevator size is determined by the mandated size for a stretcher, but we're detailing it in a way that one can still get inside the steeple, which we think is a very important experience to have. You see that we're still able to get a sizable terrace. I also want to point out that we've reconfigured the rooftop mechanical equipment with the chillers split from the north and the south. And of course, we've reduced the number of chillers by doing an ice storage system on the lowest level. And then the DOAS unit is located on the north side. So we, by working with this strategy, we're able to put more chillers where you can't see them from any perspective. Go ahead, Steve. We showed this image or similar image in the last hearing. This is very important aspect of the program, that all get access to the view of the park and the skyline, to be part of the city. Many who come to the Children's Museum don't have that experience, but also understand the steeple as a element that you can walk in and observe up close. We think this will be a thrilling experience. Go ahead. The upper roof, the roof of the monitor, shows you the location of the skylights, also the fact that we're including a very thin line photovoltaic panel system that's very much in keeping with the mission of the Children's Museum and their highlighting of environmental issues. You also see here the roof line of the new bulkhead. I'll walk you through some views quickly. The view from the south, so we've set up the existing, the previously proposed, and the new. Previously proposed was much more prominent, partly by intention. We wanted the feeling the museum was there. Now you feel the continuity of the roof and the copper monitor above. Go ahead, Steve. Moving further to the north along Central Park West, again, you see the continuation of the terracotta roof tile and the monitor above. The view from the park you see maybe a peak of the monitor above. And further into the park, you see the continuation of the terracotta roof line and the copper of the monitor. From the north, looking southwest, you see almost nothing. We have eliminated, we had a enclosure there and mechanical equipment. We've taken that away. We really don't need it now because you see very little or almost nothing. Go ahead, Steve. Now this is looking from on 96th Street, looking to the northeast. You see the change in the bulkhead. In addition to lowering the bulkhead, because we reconfigured the stairs, we've moved that. It's now centered and about, I think it's 6 feet back from where we had it positioned previously. So it's lower, further back. Obviously the difference, we fought to get as symmetrical as we could in the previous configuration, but we were dealing with the elevator and elevator machine room. Now, because the machine room is a floor lower, we're able to center the shaft and set it much further back. And then it is as before clad in terracotta panels, and I'll show you more details on the elevator shaft. Go ahead. Straight on elevation, it's never the view you ever actually have, but you can see the difference here in the continuation of the roof. We have the copper of the monitor above and the infill. Well, I'll show you a closer elevation. This just gives you a sense of the massing. Go ahead, Steve. From the east looking west, well, in drawing form, you see the bulkhead beyond. You really won't see anything from the street level. Go ahead. The view from the west reflects the centered bulkhead, also the restored chimney, and I think we said before we plan on inviting the chimney swifts back. Go ahead. From the north, again, we do have the extension for the mechanical equipment, which is internal, and you see a little bit of the terrace, but this view is never visible because the adjacent building would block this view. In more detail, this is a combination of materials that exist within the building. I think I've touched on most of them. We do need to extend the railing at the terrace, and we have a clear glass 48-inch rail there. Below that, where we're making the transition from the shoulder terraces, where we've set back the building line there. That is glazed at those insets. Okay, Steve. The bulkhead is a stack bond of 3-foot by 9-inch terracotta panels in the color very similar to the limestone, I'm sorry, the white granite, the Concord granite. It would be a rain screen treatment, 3/8-inch joint. We articulated the coping and then have a copper roof, hip roof at the top. And we have this band that further defines the scale, articulates the top of the bulkhead. Go ahead. The other issue of discussion were the banners on the east. These are not, these would not be in place 100% of the time. The signage for the museum will be on the glass doors, but at the occasions that there would be a special exhibit or something, they would hang them at this location. Steve, go forward one. These are smaller than you asked us to look at the size. We looked at the proportion of the piers. We felt strongly that the banners should feel as though they work with that scale and quality of the pier. And so we tested the proportions, and we feel this sits well within the stone definition of the pier. Go ahead, Steve. And then we were also asked to relook at the how we treat the dedication panel on the south side of the building. We would have a reversible sign that, in this case, we made it smaller than it was before, so that you understood that there was another surface behind our sign. So we're not going from edge to edge of the indentation, we're setting back from that. And I believe that concludes our presentation, what we wanted to show you. We've changed the approach of the building to work within its defined elements, and look forward to your discussion.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions for the applicant? All right, not seeing any hands raised. I think that means that we can move to our discussion. So I'm going to start to unmute you so we can make a move toward that discussion.
Sarah, do we want to note any testimony?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Rich, thank you. Did we receive any written comments?
Yes, we received 13 letters in opposition and 3 in support.
Okay. And those were all shared with the commissioners prior to today. Okay, so let's start our discussion. I think, as you all know, the last time we saw this proposal, and as has been presented today, there were really 4 main comments. The biggest one, I think, was the rooftop additions, both the mechanical installations, the catwalk, and then the addition to the space under the roof. And we asked the applicants to restudy that, to reduce that in terms of size and bulk, but also to preserve the slope of the roof. And the applicants have done that. They have eliminated the catwalk, they've reconfigured the mechanical equipment, moved the elevator, and now the proposal preserves the pitch of the roof and just raises the monitor, which is consistent with what the commission has previously approved at this building in another adaptive reuse application. We also asked that they restudy keeping more of the stained glass, and both in terms of some of the decorative stained glass, as well as the caming to preserve the configuration, even if where the stained glass is removed and replaced with clear glass. And the applicants have responded with a proposal that retains borders and replaces other glass with clear glass, but retains the configuration of the caning. And finally, there were comments about the entry doors. This, I think, was not unanimous, but some of the commissioners asked the applicants to reconsider the need to make all 3 doors accessible. And I think the applicants have responded today, explaining the need more carefully, but also showing the details of how those changes would work. And I do think that for an adaptive reuse, these types of changes to entrances are consistent with our commission actions on other buildings of this type. And finally, the commission asked them to look at the amount of signage. And so the applicants have responded with some reduction, but also a plan to have some banners removed at some, and not up all the time, and only up when there are special exhibits. So I think there's a response to the 4 main areas. And so I'd like to start our discussion with that as the framework, and to hear if we think that they've responded enough to address all of our concerns. So why don't we start? I'll start across the table with Commissioner Shamir Baran. Would you like to start on this one?
Yes, thank you. Firstly, I just want to say that I think that this is an outstanding adaptive reuse project. And, you know, we have a sense of this kind of long term. We've seen a previous version, a previous attempt at adaptive reuse several years ago. And there's, you know, the 2 approaches are entirely different. Clearly, they have a different programmatic interests, but I think the kind of the sensitivity, the attention to retaining and understanding all the qualities of the historic building while making it be something completely different, it is just extraordinary. And I really commend the architects for all of their work and all of their careful listening to what the commissioners' concerns were the last time around. I particularly had concerns about 2 things: the removal of the stairs at the front, and the fact that there was no kind of reference to those stairs in the bases of the columns. And I have to say that they've convinced me that this building can take the full, the doorways going straight to the ground in order to accommodate accessibility. And the fact that the kind of the rhythm of these giant openings and the kind of peculiar, kind of very reduced symmetry in the historic building means to me that it can apply to all 3 openings, meaning that accessibility at all 3 openings makes sense to me rather than just at one. So they've convinced me of that. Secondly, my other concern was that I thought that as much of the mechanical systems should be moved over to the north side of the building so that visibility was less of an issue. And I think that they weren't able to do it entirely, but I think that a lot of that was achieved. And so I'm really excited about that. I think that everything that they're doing with the tiles and having them be sort of like scales, some of them transparent and some not, is really interesting and well done. And so just in general, I think that this is beyond approvable, and I'm very excited to see it happen. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
I think, I don't think I had a concern about the entrances last time. I'm not sure, but I'm okay with their explanation as it stands. On stained glass, I just still want to make sure, it's kind of hard to tell with the presentation, that whether they are maximizing the retention of all the non-religious icon glass. So I'd like them to work with staff to make sure that's actually true. As far as the rooftop is concerned, I think the way I describe it is they uncluttered it, they calmed it down, and I think therefore when you look at it, even if there's close to the same level of visibility through the central part of the roof, it doesn't distract you as much from the beauty of the architecture, and so I'm fine with this.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Jefferson.
Yes. A difficult architectural problem well resolved. I think all the views that I saw from the distance were all beautifully done, except for view 7. You go to view 7. Can we do that? This one, the one proposed view. The dominance of the bulkhead. And I was wondering, why does it have to be symmetrical? Could it be moved further north? And that's just a suggestion. But I think the overall thinking, the overall architectural elements been beautifully done.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi?
I'm unmuted, right?
Yes.
So I also want to thank the applicants for paying close attention to everything that the commissioners expressed in terms of their concerns. I think my biggest concern was, the top of the building and how it would read from every angle. And it's really quite a wonderful piece of architecture, and the idea of compromising it was concerning. And as we've also discussed, the whole concept of taking religious buildings and transforming them into another use is quite complicated from on every single level. And it always gives me pause, but I feel that the careful way that the applicant has step by step approached this and addressed the issues that we've raised has been very positive. In addition to really streamlining, I'm going to say, the roof line and the bulkhead, I do think how they've addressed the stained glass works, and I definitely think the signage is helpful. In terms, it's more in keeping with what other cultural institutions do, and it doesn't impact the integrity of the building in any way. And I guess I just want to close by saying CMOM is a very, very important arts institution for children in the city, and it has been suffocating in its space for so many years. And still, it's managed to reach beyond its doors in so many ways. And it's been so successful in achieving its mission. And I want to congratulate you on bringing your institution to this next place. And I'm very happy to support this project and your efforts.
Thank you. Commissioner Bland.
I'll just pile on. It may be more difficult to adaptively reuse a prison into luxury housing. Not that anybody's doing that, but otherwise, a church and almost anything else is a very difficult thing. And the commission has had experience with it for 40 years, I suppose, or maybe more even, that I'm aware of. It's always difficult. So this is an exemplary, at this point now, an exemplary adaptive reuse of a hugely important building. Witness the huge turnout for the public testimony and so forth. Everybody cares about this building. So I don't need to go on about it. Others have said and will say the things that I'm sure I believe in. I'm really happy about the elevator bulkhead moving away and toward the center. I think even though we can't see that it's actually centered, but we sort of know that it is. And I think that is an important aspect. The doors were fine before, if in my judgment. The only thing I want to do is add to John's note about the iconography of the windows and working with staff. Just be sure that we save everything that's not a religious icon. Otherwise, I think this is really a huge leap forward, and I congratulate the institution and best of luck with your new director in place and a new location coming along soon. Thank you. It's been a privilege to listen.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I really agree. This is really a nice adaptive reuse. And just like Fred and John, I think the as much as possible, the stained glass windows should be preserved. But this is really, really a nice project. And kudos to the institution and the applicant.
Okay, thanks. And Commissioner Devonshire.
I think they've made a reasonable effort to respond to our comments. I agree with the comments of my colleagues about the religious iconography. I think as much of the stained glass that can be saved needs to be saved.
And we might I just want to circle back to that once we go through the rest of the comments. So why don't we go through Commissioner Goldblum?
Okay. I agree. This is a much improved application for a very important institution that will be a good match for this building. And I'll repeat what I said before about their retention of the interior space, which I think is really very, very valuable, very important to me in this application. It's a real worthy and worthwhile thing to do. I wanted to echo everyone's comments about the glass and be more specific. One thing that wasn't, the specific comment is about the cartouches, those kind of decorative panels in the top segments of the arched windows on 96th, 97th Streets. One of the interesting details of the application that is actually quite lovely that was not focused on when that was discussed is the fact that even though the floors do traverse the cartouches, they do so 4 feet away from the glass. The floors do not come to the perimeter. There's a section in the appendix, I believe, that shows that. And as a result, I think it's a setup. I mean, they've done the city and the building a favor by allowing for those cartouches to remain. And yes, they won't have the perfect correspondence that was intended perhaps in the original design, but I think that the nature of an adaptive reuse, the charm of an adaptive reuse is in those serendipitous conflicts where things just aren't exactly right and they make you think about what used to be. So I think that even though you have a red band across the middle of the cartouche, that red band really doesn't happen until 4 feet away. So you can stand at a railing and look over the railing and be up close to that cartouche and really appreciate it. So I think that while the religious iconography perhaps at the center of the oval should be removed, I think the balance of that very lovely bit of work could be retained without harm. I also wanted to add 2 other aspects of restoration, of like holding on to original material that I think could be affected with little negative effect. First, I agree with my colleagues on the doors. I think that they've made a good argument for lowering the doors. But I think that the wood exterior doors should be retained, which we've done in other cases. They can be left open at all times when the museum is open. The openings appear to be large enough to allow for ADA access, comfortable ADA access between the opened doors. And I think that the applicant could work with staff to retain the wood doors in place, lowered down to grade level with transoms, new transoms above. I also think that the copper cresting at the clear story is one of the most distinctive features of the roof of this building, and it's something that we as a commission fought very hard for when we critiqued the project originally. And it seems that because there's going to be no windows in the vertical face facing south or facing facing east, there's no reason why the original copper cresting, it looks like a kind of a Roman grill motif, could be retained and reapplied in the new heightened eave location. And the same argument goes for the copper trim that is being removed on the gable end facing east. I think that that's original historic material, and if we can salvage it, we should try our best to do so. And I think in terms of the banners, the banners size is okay for me, but one's facing east, I mean, but I think they should be rotated and made into blade signs instead of banners. So I think that the weight and simplicity and kind of cleanliness of those smooth granite faces were critical to the design of the building. And by making them a background to signage, I think that is not the best use of them. I think by turning the signs 90 degrees and allowing the volume of the building to remain visible, it would be a better way to treat the landmark.
Okay. Commissioner Chapin?
I'm very, pleased in general by the, not only the response of the applicant, but I really think they have achieved a better architectural design as a result. And my main concerns originally were the treatment of the doors and the massing of the roof. And I think that the treatment of the doors really works very well at this point. It's helped create a much better sense of proportion and also of hierarchy. So that's a great improvement. And also the change in the massing on the roof, the reduction of the bulkheads, the removal of the clerestory, the retention now of a sense of the roof line. And I think that Commissioner Goldblum's remarks about the cresting and the other copper features is a good idea to try to incorporate those as well, if that's possible. I think that the other issues are the retention of the glass, the stained glass, and I think, yes, to the extent possible, it should be retained. There may be instances where the retention really does not seem to work well in terms of the appearance of the window. So I think the staff should work with them on that in general. But I think in general, they're doing a good job retaining it. And obviously the issue of the cartouches is a little more difficult, but I'd like to see as much retained as possible as well of the original. With regard to the signage, I think that the reduction of the signage and the current signage, I could approve it. Michael's suggestion is interesting about trying to turn it. But at the same time, we do permit a lot of very large signage on major institutions that we have approved over and over again. So I think I could approve it as presented. And I'm very happy to see the museum coming into this new life, and it's difficult to do it. And I think the architects have done a very good job.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Holford-Smith?
Well, I think my fellow commissioners have said it all. It's an excellent application, and I think they were extremely responsive to our comments, and it's resulted in a much, I think a simpler, more elegant design, especially the rooftop. I really appreciate Commissioner Goldblum's suggestions about keeping the copper from the original monitor. I think that's something that could be worked into the new rooftop. But I think all the changes that have made are really excellent. I do agree that we should keep the cartouches if at all possible, and as much as the stained glass as we can.
All right, great. Thank you all. I think, this has been a very interesting project, and I think is now very well resolved and will be, a wonderful new home for this important institution in the city. And I think we're at a place where we can vote to approve it. I do think that the majority of commissioners would like to see those cartouches retained without the center portion, which is the religious iconographic portion. And then I think at that point, all of the non-religious stained glass would be retained. And with respect to the wood doors, I think everybody is comfortable, with the exception of Commissioner Goldblum, on the entrances, but I do want to note that those wood doors are being retained on the inside, hung on the walls. And so I think that we should go ahead and make a motion to approve it with the modification to retain the cartouches in those windows on the south elevation. And also, I think we should ask them to work with the staff to determine how they can retain as much copper as possible at the roof line as well, in the cresting and the trim. So Commissioner Lutfi, could you make a motion with those two modifications?
Sure. Let me just do one thing. Okay, in the matter of, excuse me, docket 2005782-361 Central Park West, First Church of Christ Scientists of New York City, individual landmark. A Beaux-Arts classical style church designed by Carrera and Hastings and built in 1899 to 1903. The application is to construct additions, replace windows, alter entrances, and replace doors, install signage, and excavate at the cellar. See, I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the proposed work will facilitate the adaptive reuse of this historic church building as a children's museum, that the proposed rooftop addition will sit within the footprint of the historic copper-clad monitor, and while taller than the monitor, will be clad with profiled and perforated copper to recall its historic profile and character in a modern way, that the slope of the terracotta roof will be recreated with a combination of terracotta roof tiles and perforated terracotta rain screen to allow light into the space, that the glass panel railings around the viewing platform and connecting to the tower will blend with the roofscape, that the mechanical equipment will be located at the least visible location possible at the northern side of the monitor at the roof hip and will not be visible from any public thoroughfare, that the elevator and stair bulkheads are necessary to provide access to the rooftop performance space within the enlarged monitor, and while heavily visible from the south of 96th Street, will be clad in a light-colored terracotta rain screen to blend with the facades below, and will have a profiled cornice and hipped roof, imparting a level of articulation that complements the historic facades. That removing steps from the 3 Central Park West entries and the entry at 96th Street will allow for barrier-free access to the building at all entrances, supporting the programmatic requirements of the museum. That the new entrances will feature salvaged granite thresholds, and the proposed bronze and glass doors featuring transoms with decorative grills will relate well to the proportions of the entrances and harmonize with the details and materials of the building. That salvaging the historic walnut wood doors and relocating them to the interior of the entry vestibules will preserve historic fabric and maintain a connection of these significant architectural features to the entries. That the removal of religious iconography from stained glass windows and the replacement of these panels, opalescent glazing throughout with clear glass will aid in the adaptive reuse of the building, and the retention of stained glass borders at the perimeter of the monumental windows will maintain these character defining features and preserve the presence of stained glass fenestration around the building. That replacing the smaller operable wood and bronze casement windows throughout with fixed windows matching the historic configuration, details, materials, and finishes would be difficult to discern from the street. That the proposed alterations at the West 96th Street areaway road, including removing granite stairs, modifying and enlarging 6 windows and doors, and new windows and doors will be minimally visible and will not detract from the building. That the replacement of some windows with louvers and the relocation of mechanical units within a a rear ancillary wing that is minimally visible will help to avoid similar installations at more prominent locations. That the excavation for a new sub-cellar floor directly beneath the former sanctuary space will be designed to avoid underpinning at the building's tower and exterior walls, and will be executed in compliance with DOB regulations under the supervision of a licensed professional engineer. That the installation of 2 banner signs located at non-decorative granite masonry flanking the main entry at the Central Park West facade will not conceal any significant architectural features, and the additional banner sign at the 96th Street facade will cover a religious inscription in a non-destructive manner. And that the cumulative effect of the proposed work will enable adaptive reuse of a long unoccupied church building, and it will not detract from the significant architectural character of the building or disrupt the overall composition of the primary facades and rooftop. However, I find that the removal of the decorative cartouches without religious themes at the monumental windows will eliminate significant historic fabric and will diminish the special character of the landmark. I therefore recommend that only the overtly religious theme panels within decorative cartouches be removed and substituted with clear glass, and the remainder of the decorative cartouches be retained, and that the applicant work with staff to determine and how to best retain the copper on the roof as possible.
Thank you. Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, and Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Brown,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, 11 in favor, none opposed, the motion carries.
All right, that's approved with those modifications. Thank you very much. Good luck, and we look forward to seeing the museum in its new home. So that is the last item for the day, and we are not meeting next week, and we will have another public hearing and meeting on June 23rd. So we'll see you all then. Thank you, and enjoy next week.
Thank you.
All right.